Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, dozens are killed along South Africa's eastern coast in the wake of heavy rains that cause landslides and severe flooding. President Cyril Ramaphosa warns that the destruction's linked to climate change. Also, demonstrators from across Sudan continue to head into the capital to join the throng. Protesters prepare for a 1 million-man march planned for Thursday to show the military council that they will not give up until power is handed back to a civilian administration. And Mali's the continent's top cotton producer, but with only 2% of the crop processed in the country, leaders are pushing for that to change and for more investment in ways to add value to cotton. But first, at least 60 people have been killed in flooding and mudslides along South Africa's eastern coast. Rescue workers spent Wednesday digging through the debris of buildings that were destroyed in the aftermath of heavy rains, and more than 1,000 people have been forced from their homes. President Cyril Ramaphosa visited some of the affected communities in KwaZulu-Natal, where he warned that the extreme weather was partly down to climate change. Shirley Sitbent tells us more.
It's no longer raining in Durban, but water keeps streaming down the roads. Rescue workers spent the day digging out bodies from under the rubble, under buildings that collapsed in the mudslides. As bodies were carried away, crosses were put in the ground to signal where residents were killed. That's where President Cyril Ramaphosa came to show support.
We will give you as much support as we possibly can, and we will make sure that the needs that you have are addressed and they are met at all our levels, provincial, local, as well as national level.
The disaster began on Monday when heavy rains poured on the region. Authorities failed to foresee how dangerous the situation was. And then mudslides tore down homes, carrying everything that was on their path.
I saw my neighbor, this White House right behind you, wall fall. And I was in the bar when the floor started cracking. And it made about a half-a-meter gap, and I jumped. And so did my grandson that was with me. And we ran through the TV lounge, and with that, it collapsed.
Weather services now warn more rains and strong winds are expected, which means buildings and bridges are still at risk. For security reasons, schools will remain shut until further notice.
Meanwhile, Mozambique's bracing for the arrival of Tropical Storm Kenneth late Thursday or early Friday. It's expected to turn into a cyclone. And it has already hit the Comoros, where schools were closed and flights suspended on Wednesday because of the violent winds. They've caused landslides, flooding and cut off roads there. The storm comes about a month after around 1,000 people were killed when Cyclone Idai hit Mozambique and Zimbabwe hard. Mozambique's warned that the current extreme weather could affect almost 700,000 people. Sudanese protesters are calling for a mammoth million-strong march to be held on Thursday. That's to ratchet up pressure on the country's interim military leaders to speed up the handover of power to a civilian administration. The military council took over after ousting longtime leader Omar al-Bashir earlier in April. This was following months of protests against his 3-decade-long regime. Demonstrators have also threatened a general strike. On Wednesday, protesters continued to head to Khartoum to join rallies being held there. Even judges have said that they'll be joining a long-running sit-in in the capital. The unrest that eventually unseated Bashir began last December, sparked by the country's fragile economy. Our correspondent sent us this report.
Difaf is prepping for her next class. She's an English professor at a Khartoum university. Alongside textbooks are also kids' books. She's forced to teach specialized courses.
It's a prestigious job, but it's not a job in terms of money. It hardly brings anything. I have to work extra to survive each month.
The equivalent of about €50 a month, she struggles to get by. And when she tries to withdraw cash, it can be tough. The waiting lines stretch down the street.
It's like this every day. We have to wait in line just to withdraw a bit of money. It's become a Sudanese habit.
Those who reach the end of the line still have to wait. The ATM often breaks down. Difaf is late for the course she's teaching. She has to leave the line. Before arriving at the university, she passes by her local bakery for some bread, a Sudanese staple.
Bread has gotten so expensive. Before, with 1 cent, I got a whole loaf. Now the price has doubled. Even things the poorest count on have become expensive. So they're protesting because there's no other choice.
The owner says although there are clients, he's not making much money.
There are many reasons for the rise of the price of bread, especially that flour isn't subsidized by the government anymore. If it were, it'd be cheaper. And yeast now costs nearly the same as flour.
The inflation rate has been devastating in this country where, according to statistics in 2009, half the population lives below the poverty line.
After more than 5 years of brutal conflict, South Sudan's hopes now rest on a fragile peace accord that was settled on last September. However, rebels led by former Vice President Riek Machar say that fighting could start again if there isn't a 6-month delay to properly prepare for a power-sharing government. Now, that was part of the deal agreed with President Salva Kiir. Hundreds of thousands have died, and civilians continue to struggle with the horrific cost of the country's war. Not only the presence of violence, but also the absence of basic services like hospitals and medical care.
Nyachot is 2 years old. Just a couple of hours ago, he was convulsing from malaria. His parents made it just in time to this clinic in Udia, a remote village in northeastern South Sudan. The little boy has been sick for several days.
When I came to the clinic this morning, there was nobody here, so I went back home. When I returned, he was unconscious. He was shivering and convulsing at the same time.
Nyachot could be saved, but others are not as lucky. Horrific tales of war, rape and displacement have become commonplace in South Sudan. But for many, the greatest danger is often easily treatable diseases. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, which runs this clinic, 70% of deaths due to illness could be easily avoided. This region of the Upper Nile is one of the worst affected.
Most of the children who die here, they die out of mostly 3 common morbidities, which is malaria, acute watery diarrhea, and respiratory tract infection, which progresses to pneumonia in the long run.
The Upper Nile region, which borders Sudan and Ethiopia, was ravaged by the war in 2017. South Sudan's infant and maternal mortality rate is among the highest in the world. Women do the lion's share of the work at home, often taking care of many children, and as a result often delay taking their children to the clinic.
It began with a stomach pain. All my children sleep together under one mosquito net. So if one falls ill, they all fall ill.
The clinic cannot deal with more complicated cases like operations or blood transfusions. The closest hospital is in Marban, which is a 3-day walk or a 5-hour drive away. But in Udia, there is only 1 car in all the village.
Well, Mali is Africa's top cotton producer. The crop accounts for almost a quarter of its exports and supports the livelihoods of about 4 million people, many of them living in the countryside. But only 2% of the crop is processed in Mali. The country's leaders have cottoned on to the fact that they're missing a trick and potentially huge profits on that front.
It's early in the morning in this corner of southeast Mali, but the local farmers are already hard at work, harvesting cotton fibre from the fields. They take great care in the work. Cotton, often called white gold, is the country's primary export product. The industry is supported by the Malian government, which offers loans to cotton farmers.
It's helpful because the people who grow cotton get fertilizer. On the other hand, those who do not do so have difficulty accessing fertilizers, even if they have money. Sometimes we also grow corn in addition to cotton.
But only a small part of this harvest will be processed in Mali. Cotton is usually directly exported without being treated. It's a tendency that Marianne wants to change. Her shop in Bamako uses traditional strips of fabric and handmade yarn to make 100% organic cotton clothing.
I'm committing to processing it here, not exporting it in a raw form. There are techniques, a certain craftsmanship. It's a real social, cultural and patrimonial issue. It's a shame that these things are not valued.
Comatex is the country's only cotton processing plant. It deals with just 1% of the country's production, and strong competition from abroad means that business is tough going.
They say it's a big textile market, but it's also a market which is flooded with imported textiles which are cheaper. That seriously disrupts the company's business.
With 728,000 tons produced in 2018, Mali is Africa's leading cotton producer. The main potential for growth in the sector now lies in ensuring that more of that raw produce is processed at home.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.